Now we want to actually put the nut on this thing, but the nut is a little bit different from some of these other components in that it's not really important to put it in here. It's kind of cosmetic more than anything, because probably if you were putting a nut on this thing, you would probably buy it online, and then you would just chop it down to the size that you want. And then notch it as needed. So in this case, it's really a cosmetic component. We don't need to have the same rigorous control on it that we have on everything else in this assembly. So let's go and create a new part in the context of our assembly. It's going to drop it in, give us this little check mark, and the check mark is so we could create a sketch. So I'm just going to hit escape because we don't need a sketch right now. Then I could rename this. Let's call this video 31 nut. Alright, so we have a nut here. Now I'm going to open that file. So we have our new blank document here. Insert part. And then I'm going to find that master model, the most recent version of the master model, and insert that. So we have it. This is just like every other component that we've created so far, by the way. And when we bring this in, let's make sure that we get our planes in there as well, because we're going to want those. We can hide these surface bodies, and we can hide all those planes as well, for now. And then close this guy back up, and we'll go back to our assembly. Now we can see our sketch components are in place, and those are going to be really useful, and we even have our nut height sketch right here ready to use. But the other thing about creating a nut is that once it's put in here, we're going to want to like file it down so that it matches the profile of our fretboard. And you know, there are different strategies by which we could do this, and I'm going to do it in a way that I generally, you know, for a robust assembly, I don't recommend. But in this case, because the nut is kind of an unimportant component, it's kind of I mean, it's important for playing, but in terms of this assembly, you know, it's not a critical key piece of the guitar. So I'm going to take a shortcut. Let's grab our nut file here, and first of all, let's make sure to save it. Right now it's in brackets. You can see the name is in brackets. That means that it's internal to the assembly. It hasn't been saved in an external part yet. So let's go here and say Save Part in External File. Click OK, and that's just going to save it out for us so that we have a, you know, a copy of that externally that we're referencing. And now I'm going to click on it and click this Edit Part button. So it turns blue because we're editing it in the context of the assembly. And now we can actually work with it. And what I want to do is grab hold of these surfaces and bring them into this part. And we have a couple of options when we do that. And when we're working in the context of an assembly, you're going to see this little button right up here. It's got this little, it's kind of a link icon with a red X over it. And that says No External References. Now generally, when working in the context of an assembly, I recommend leaving this checked because you don't want to usually be making references, cross-references within an assembly. You don't want one part in an assembly to reference another part because trust me, that just gets messy. I mean, real messy. It's going to make your life really hard. But in this case, I'm actually going to have an exception to that rule. Let's make an exception because it's going to be really helpful to us to be able to reference these surfaces. And like I said, this is a non-critical component, so we can get away with it. So let's go to our Surfaces tab here. We're going to leave external references turned on so that we can grab our Offset tool. Grab these three surfaces and just offset them by 0 millimeters, which is just a clever way of duplicating those surfaces into our current component. So now we have them in there to work with. So we can exit that now. Let's open up this part. And we're going to see that now, if we zoom in here, we have those surfaces in place, and those surfaces happen to reference that other component, the fretboard component itself. So you can see here the surface offset has this little arrow next to it. That little arrow means it's referencing geometry outside of this document. Alright, so let's go up here to the top and grab our Extend Surface tool. We're going to extend this edge, and how about we get these three edges as well. And we'll go out by 10 millimeters using the same surface method. Click OK, and now we have a little bit of extra to work with on that surface. That's going to be useful to us. And then also we'll probably want to define the top of our nut. So let's extrude this. I'm going to extrude that out. Let's just say it's a mid-plane extrusion, so we're going both directions. So we get more than we need on there. There we go. So that's plenty nice and big. And finally, just to be sure that we got plenty of this, let's edge extend this last edge out just a little bit on that side. Looks good. And now we can actually model the basic shape of the nut. So let's go to the front plane and create a sketch. Zoom right on in. Grab my rectangle tool. I'm going to do a corner rectangle, just like so. Grab my right plane and make this edge collinear with the right plane. I'm going to make this point coincident with this outside point on our fretboard. And then we just have to define the width of this guy. We'll set it to, I believe, 6 millimeters should be just about right. A lot of times these things are 1/4 inch. We'll just call it 6 millimeters and be done with it. And we'll extrude that. And when we do our extrusion, I'm going to say up to surface, and we'll just come right up to this nut height surface that we created. Okay, so we got a solid there. We can hide that surface. We don't need it anymore. We can also go to our surfaces, cut with surface, use this surface that we imported from our fretboard. Let's find that arrow that shows us which direction it's going to cut. I'm having trouble finding the arrow, so I'm just going to click OK and hope for the best. And it looks like it was already pointed the correct direction. Alright, so that looks good. Pretty happy with it. Let's go to our features. We'll grab our round tool. Let's do a chamfer. I'm going to grab a chamfer on the back edge of this guy. I like distance chamfers. It's kind of a style thing. You can do whatever you want. I'm going to make it 4 millimeters on one side, 4 on the other, and actually I think this first one is what I want to be, I don't know, 2 millimeters. That looks better. Yeah, so we got a little bit of something to work with there slope-wise for the strings to go straight down. And then we could duplicate this. Let's go to our mirror tool. We'll grab our right plane, and under bodies to mirror, we'll mirror this body with merge solids enabled. Now we've got a full nut here ready to go. Let's go ahead and hide all of our sketches just to get those out of the way for now. We're going to need a couple of those later. Let's hide this. We need our string positions for the nut, so we'll just leave those showing for the moment. Close that up, hit save, head back over here, and we are looking pretty good, right? Not too shabby.